I think that then it's time for us to take the trip from Latin America to where the sun has been shining for a little while, because they're probably past their lunchtime, and we will go now to Africa. And there we have two presentations. The first presenter is Dr. Faisal Gabar, who is a lecturer in the Department of Sociology at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. His research and teaching interests go around African migration, social change, working class history and organization, as well as looking at African historical sociology and social theory. Dr. Gabar, are you here with us?
Yes, I'm here, Paddy.
Okay, and then I would just ask Dr. Gabar to go directly into the presentation, and you have 7 minutes for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paddy, and thank you, everyone. Greetings. Unfortunately, we are in winter in South Africa, so the sun isn't shining. It is a privilege to be on this platform and to share lessons about things happening on the continent. Now, apart from a few countries across Africa, borders are still closed, although restrictions have been eased differentially across states. Now, the reality, though, is that states are increasingly adopting a very nationalistic posture in dealing with COVID. Relief packages are distributed as if COVID only affects citizens. And for example, in Ghana, which is where I come from, my country, the state actually threatened at the beginning of the pandemic to deport non-citizens who test positive for COVID. Luckily, no such thing has happened so far. But what COVID has done on the continent is to exacerbate an important issue, which is who belongs to society, to whom does the society belong. The lines of demarcation have become sharper, especially with state action. Just like in Latin America, the bulk of migration in Africa actually happens within the continent, and in particular within what we call the sub-region. So the bulk of people from West Africa move within West Africa, the bulk of people from Southern Africa move within Southern Africa, same with the other sub-regions. Now, migration in Africa is a historical underpinning of livelihood structures, but also ways of living. People's identities are very much tied into the space that they consider as their horizon. But over time, states in Africa have adopted a very restrictive understanding of migration and what it means for people to move. However, attempts at regional integration have led to a situation whereby protocols have been put in place that enable people from sub-regions, say West Africa, to move within the sub-region for a particular point of time, and also in Southern Africa and other parts of the continent. Now, my presentation will largely focus on Southern Africa and South Africa in particular, and then a few instances in East Africa and North Africa. And what I want to highlight here is the importance of grassroots forms of solidarity as best practices. How in moments of this magnitude, we actually see the opposite of exclusion. We see outlines of a different kind of society that ordinary people have extended towards each other. South Africa is the major point of migration in Southern Africa, but also across the continent, really. You have people from every part of the continent in large numbers in South Africa. The states, as I said, has adopted a very restrictive outlook towards migration. At the beginning of May, the state rolled out a fairly generous relief package, to cushion people who've lost jobs, people who have lost their means of livelihood. But the relief package was expressly formulated to cater for citizens. And so refugees, asylum seekers, and stateless persons were completely excluded. But two civil society groups took the state to court and actually won a case that forced the state to extend the relief package to refugees. Now, this was a moment in which many refugees and asylum seekers were actually going through the most in terms of lack of access to basic necessities, but also when it comes to the important question of access to healthcare, because there is a certain element of the testing requirement that demands that people have national identification numbers, which effectively, shut out people who are not citizens from being tested. So as if the virus, discriminates based on citizenship status. There have also been community-based initiatives, especially in the informal settlements, where, many migrants, many working class migrants, so people come together to try and extend support to each other. People come together to try and take care of each other when they fall ill. And this crosses nationality boundaries. This is between South Africans and non-South Africans. And this is important, especially in South Africa, where, as I'm sure we all know, you have this occasional outbursts of xenophobic attacks targeted largely at working class migrants from other parts of the continent. So it's important to have this kind of pushback against exclusion, which is largely driven by the state. Sometime in June, there was a poster that was doing the round across the country, basically saying, on this day, we're going to make sure we kick all the foreigners out of our country, right? But there was a huge counter mobilization in communities, by civil society organizations, a major movement in South Africa called Abahlali Basamanjondolo, which is the shack dwellers movement, release a powerful statement, calling for an inclusive policy that ropes in everybody who lives in South Africa in the fight against COVID. And I think that is an instance where one sees a bottom-up approach, to thinking or managing migration, which completely contradicts the exclusionary outlook of states. There are also, initiatives, one of which I'm part of, it's called the South Africa Migrant Solidarity Fund, which basically tries to extend some form of support to female-headed households. It isn't that much; it's about $16, but that could do something, So often, what we do is to get vouchers for one of the major retail outlets, and then people can go and get food items. In Kenya, for example, the Dadaab refugee camp saw a collaboration between the Kenyan state and the UNHCR to create an isolation and quarantine center, but also the construction of close to 1,000-bed facility to take care of people who fall ill. And what I find interesting is a refugee-led working group, that produces face masks. So far it has produced close to 200,000 face masks. And I think this is also interesting in terms of the livelihood of those refugees, but also their active involvement in dealing with this, as opposed to being viewed as passive agents in this process. There's also an attempt to provide information on how to prevent COVID in Oromo, in Somali, in Dinka, Swahili, Nuer, French, and other languages. I think this integrative process is important because it begins to come to grips with the reality that the society is heterogeneous, right? Migration has brought people from across the continent, from even outside of the continent together. And so if one is thinking about tackling a disease of this nature, then one has to be inclusive as possible. The final example I want to give, which I think is really important in terms of access to education, is from Morocco, where, again, the UNHCR, some local organizations, and in partnership with the Ministry of Education in Morocco, try to facilitate online learning of refugee children, during the lockdown. Now, that is very important because across the continent, there's very little discussion about where is the place of migrants in this moment. How do refugees fare in this moment? What is the status of stateless people in this moment? So I'll stop here in the hope that I have not overshot my 7 minutes, and then we can have a conversation subsequently. Thank you very much.
Dr. Faisal Garba, thank you very much for that presentation. And indeed, we could ask you to give us even more. And I would have even been more selfish to say that I would have loved to hear more about what your reflections were on how Zambia is managing its how they're faring on migration management. But I won't go that far because that's homeland.